So here I am in my soul, and there's the process of incarnation that has to occur. Now remember we said, when we talk about soul, incarnation has to occur in order for you to become aware that you're an individual. That's the primary purpose of incarnation, so that you become aware that you're a being that's self-aware and can choose things and has free will, can choose love, choose to learn. You need to become aware to do that. You need to become aware of yourself. So the whole incarnation process is to trigger you to become aware. So the very first moment in your existence, even though your soul was created before you incarnated, the very first moment of your awareness is the moment you're conceived. Until then, every action taken by the soul is instinctual. So in other words, it knows it has to live on earth. It knows that, and it hangs around. The soul, I'm talking about before it splits into two halves. The soul itself hangs around the earth, instinctually waiting, and instinctually even it's aware when two people are having sex. And it goes to those people, and then based upon the condition and you could say primarily the personality of those individuals, it will instinctually choose them, but not emotionally or with awareness. Does that make sense? It's all doing this all instinctually. And then the moment it's conceived, now learning takes over. Because individuality has occurred, individualization has occurred, now learning takes over. And remember, it's the half of the soul. So this soul finds an affinity to the bodies of its preference. So if the majority of the soul is masculine, and that means both halves will be masculine in their nature, predominantly masculine, I must say, then that means that the bodies that it will want are men bodies in order to express themselves. If it's dominantly like half-half, or like a ratio of that's not like 90% or more masculine or 90% or more feminine, then the two will incarnate into separate bodies, one male and one female. And remember, those bodies are both created at conception. So both the spirit body and the physical body are created at conception. And then, of course, the other half of the soul hangs around, waiting for another conception to occur that matches its dominant sexual nature. So it's not going to hang around. A female half of the soul is not going to hang around waiting for a male body. Right? And if there's 5 male bodies in a row, it's not going to take any of them. It's going to wait for the female one, and if it goes the opportunity, they'll take that. Does it make sense? Good. Okay, what's the question sense? Okay, can we go Di, Britt, Rani, and then Rani? Yep.
So I've always had this assumption that the sex of the soul, so the female would then determine the gender. You're saying the gender's already determined, and that half of the soul's attracted to the gender.
Good question. You understand the soul is the most powerful thing. So there's a number of things determining the gender. There's firstly the souls of the parents. So once there's a commingling of the two different cells, the sperm and the egg, the gender of the soul is functionally determined by its parents.
By the XY.
The gender of the physical body and the spirit body, I must say, are functionally determined by its parents.
Right.
By the laws that govern how the XY chromosomes mix, that's what determines the gender. Once the sex of the body is determined, it needs the life force of the soul in order to continue replication. The cell replication process needs life force, not just the life force of the parent, but also the life force of the soul connected. So if a soul does not connect, there will be a natural, you could say a natural miscarriage, but it won't be a miscarriage of a soul. Yeah. And also the parent wouldn't notice it. Right? Because there would be no soul connected. But the law defines that there will always be a soul connected to a conception. You follow? Mm-hmm. So at conception, the soul is attached, you could say, or incarnated, and attached to those bodies. Mm. It takes up the same dimensional space of those bodies. It becomes present here in a different dimension, but fundamentally encapsulating those bodies and providing the energy of life that not only comes from the parents but also now comes from the soul. Yeah? Brittany, was that same question? Honey?
I was thinking, when you're saying incarnation, I've always kind of thought it about, like, once, let's say, the male's first, then the soul knows that it's individualised, it's aware.
Well, the half that does. It's not completed until the other half does.
Okay.
Is it? So if you're talking about individualisation of the whole soul, then it can only be complete upon the individualisation of its two halves.
Okay, so once the female, in this example, once she comes...
Yeah, if he came first, and the individualisation of that soul wouldn't be complete until she also came. It would be begun then and completed then.
No.
Yeah, and that might be 5, 10, 15, 20 years apart. You know, normally not. Normally, usually happens within the first couple of years, but can be years apart. Yeah. Unusual to be more than 25, 30 years apart. It depends on the shortage. Do you understand what I mean by the shortage? How many people are having sex and how many bodies are getting created? Does that make sense? Yeah, so obviously the smaller the population, the longer they're waiting. Yeah? Yeah, but interestingly enough, if there's a waiting soul of one half, it presupposes or precedes a soul that's a complete soul that is yet to begin. There's a law that controls that. So what that means is that if let's say the male is incarnated, and then the female of another soul, a different soul, is wanting to incarnate first, it will not be able to incarnate first until the female of this one has incarnated. Does that make sense? And you can see why that's happened, right? Because God wants them to be as close together as possible, so there's a law controlling who comes first. Make sense? There's many other very, very huge number actually of laws of who comes first in the sequence of events as well, but we won't get into that. Mary?
I think Ron said they're aware. They're not aware of that.
No, they're not aware. They're just instinctual. It's instinctual.
Yeah, and even when you incarnate, you're not aware. You're still gaining awareness of yourself right now.
Yeah, you can say your awareness is complete yet, right? Not at all. Even now, all of you have a smidge of awareness.
Of yourself as an individual.
Yeah. And even less awareness of yourself as a duplex.
As a duplex.
Yeah.
So you're not fully self-aware until you're in the soul.
But awareness, when you incarnate, you're not aware at all until the very first point of incarnation. That's when the beginning of awareness occurs. Makes sense, right? Yep.
Rebecca.
Yeah.
I just wanted to share something. I'm an identical twin.
Yep.
And about a year ago, I had a deep desire to know the moment of conception. I just really wanted to know that. And so I prayed to God to ask him to show me. And then in my sleep state, that night, I was shown the moment of conception.
Yeah.
And I, the firstborn twin. And but our souls came at the exact same moment and went into incarnated at the exact same instant.
Correct, that is possible.
And then, just sharing what I saw, because I'm glad that you said that the moment of conception, that's when the soul comes in.
Yep.
So it's nice to have your confirmation too, as to what I saw. But because that we came into at the exact same moment, that caused...
You're identical.
Yeah, we're identical, and that's what caused...
Because a non-identical don't come in the same way.
No, yeah, but I saw, though, that's from that happening was what caused the cells to divide, to create identical twins.
That's
So I
right.
just wanted to
That's
share
right,
that.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it was like really
Solar
exciting.
system, yeah.
Yeah.
One of the
So
14
it's
is an identical twin. Yeah.
Right.
What's that? So, Val, maybe if we come down Val. And we'll go up to...
I heard the saying that soulmate couples usually go, is it like a 50k radius? Like,
Yeah, pretty, you know, again, very, it's about supply and demand, really. So, you know, there's laws that govern, govern how close they are. And of course, there are other laws now, but there's laws that govern it from a intentional perspective on the part of the parents. There's laws that govern it from it. So in the first century, Mary and I chose our child because I knew somebody who had already incarnated, and I wanted Sarah to be the other half of that person. So that's Luke, you know. So when I met Luke, I wanted my daughter to be his soulmate. So there's also laws you can engage consciously that allow that to occur. Does that make sense? For most humans, that doesn't happen, of course, because they're not conscious of those laws. So, yeah. You were saying that? Sorry,
so if I have this expectation, or this feeling that it might be someone who grew up 300k away from it.
Well, it could be. It could be. Obviously, it can be people who have grown up in Europe. You could be anywhere in Europe, pretty much. But the more higher likelihood is within the 50 to 100k radius of your conception, not your birth. So you don't know where your parents were when you were conceived. They probably don't know where they were when you were conceived. Although some parents go, oh yeah, I remember that. But functionally speaking, the average parent doesn't really understand when they conceive, don't understand where they were oftentimes. So there's a lot of laws that govern you being in close proximity, but at the end of the day, you can't be guaranteed by such things. Make sense? Yeah. Agree?
Such an interesting topic, isn't it,
Yeah.
There's also laws, isn't there, governing the attraction of the personality
Correct.
in relation to the parent's personality and the parent's injury.
Correct.
So that it's not just...
Yeah, there's laws that actually determine that the child going to the parents, there has to be a matching of personality, but also some kind of thing the child would do to benefit the parent generally and their learning. So there's a whole heap of laws that God has defined about what you're going to learn from the experience of having a child, and that does to some degree determine the personalities of the children that you bear.
So that's why you might be, some people's soulmate might be born 50 kilometres away and some might be born 500 kilometres away
because the personality doesn't match with the one's 50.
Exactly,
Yeah.
It's not just the draw of the other half, it's also the draw towards the parent.
Yeah.
It's the parents.
Both parents, not just the mother. Yeah. Isabel.
So when a soul, afresh, like when you conceive one, and they get aborted, aborted.
When the physical body gets aborted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does the other half of the soul feel that at some point when they're getting aware?
Yes, but most people on earth are not even at that stage very conscious of the sadness relating to that event, because they themselves are quite shut down emotionally oftentimes and quite detuned from of having the other half. But in a pure state, like if the parents were in a pure state and the child, in both cases, were in a pure state, and one was then aborted for whatever reason, then the other half would certainly feel that as a grief. In practice, it's rare because there's a disconnect, and there's a disconnect emotion means you don't feel much from the other half at the beginning, And so the disconnect is a lot, again, there's a whole slew of laws that govern how far you're disconnected as well. Very much about your parents' emotions, parents' feelings, parents' belief systems, and a lot of other things influence how much of a disconnect there is. And for most people on earth, there is a severe disconnection between themselves and the opposite gender, or between themselves and any person, to be honest. And so that severe disconnect has an impact upon the child, you know. So because they are disconnected, they don't feel it. It's sort of like numbing you down because you don't know. Makes sense to you, though? Christian?
With IVF, how does that all play out?
Yeah, terrible actually.
Yeah. And multiple IVFs.
Yeah, terrible. Because they're all abortions. But any IVF that's discarded and never implanted is an abortion fundamentally.
Yeah. What about frozen embryos?
Same goes. It's terrible. The child already has its sensory apparatus starting to be developed, and so it senses itself in a frozen state. So it's actually very hard on the child. Yeah. All things parents who want to be parents don't want to know about. It's sad, the effects that it has, and it's really sad when you see how many in the modern age, how many it's occurring to as well, because it's literally millions. Yeah. So it's not. And also you've got to remember every one of those has a soulmate. So that means those people will never meet their soulmates on Earth. So the damage it does in so many areas is so bad. If people understood the soul and the incarnation processes, they'd never want to engage in IVF. Yeah. Sandra?
I'm wondering about an aborted or miscarried soul when one half is already like on Earth and gets aborted or miscarried before the other one arrives.
Yep, the other one still has to arrive.
And it will still be bound to the place, even though the other soul is
there's residual energy, emotional energy that is generally present when a person leaves a place. So that's even the case with you. Like, if you, there's emotional energy attached to you where your house is, for example. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so when you leave the earth, it's the same. There's emotional energy still attached to you, but it's a very fine, it's a much less strong energy, of course, but it's still there. And so generally the other half will be attracted to the same location or, a location nearby. Makes sense? Yeah. Yep. Rob?
Is the primary relationship from parent to child that the parent is to learn something about their soul because of the child?
Well, it's interesting. But now you're asking about the laws that govern where we incarnate into, and they're quite complicated, Robert. It's like, because there's issues to do with the parent's personality and their emotions. There's also issues to do with their injuries as well that often govern the attraction. And then there's issues to do with the child and what's the best location for the child and what's the best location for the child of that personality in terms of their learning. But all of this is happening on a pure level versus what is happening on an injured level. So there's all this stuff happening on a pure level that God created. And then there's all the effects of our own soul's creations of sin that also impact upon which child which soul we receive when we're conceiving a child. And so unfortunately humans are creators in their own right here, and so we create God's created the laws, and then we create an atmosphere through our condition, and the sum total of the law with our atmosphere, with the atmosphere we created, creates the results. Does that make sense? That's the most concise way I can say it without spending the next 2 days saying it.
Yeah, so basically it's the parents' responsibility to learn, though, Like we think we're the teachers of the child, you know, rather than the student of that process.
Yeah. Not true, is it? Because most of the time, as parents, we hardly learned anything by the time we become a parent.
This is how to raise a child.
Yeah, that's right. And so, and also by the time we have a child, often we're not even prepared to have a child. Like, you know, in the sense of emotionally prepared or just prepared in terms of spiritual preparedness, you know, in terms of love. So yes, oftentimes you do learn through your interaction with the child about love as a result. And God did design this purposefully to some degree that you would learn about love by having children.
Yep.
You would learn about what it means to care for a child without having yourself involved. But unfortunately, the injuries of the parent often the parent gets so self-involved that obviously a lot of those benefits would decay over time due to the involvement.
Yep.
See you later, guys. I know it's getting late. So in terms of laws though, Robert, it's very, you know, there's a very big variation of laws and quite a large number of laws that govern what parent attracts and what child attracts the parent and the child and vice versa. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, Tone?
If there's plenty of supply and demand,
Yeah.
would the same...
When you say plenty of supply and demand, that's an interesting statement in itself. Can I just go into that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, because if you think about it, even if there's 8 billion people on Earth having sex, you know, and potential of 4 billion children whenever they have sex, let's say, the reality is there are huge numbers of souls waiting for incarnation. And when I say huge, far more than 4 billion. So there's always a bit of a shortage. So obviously that means there's time that's got to go past before the next one can come and so forth. But go on.
Generally, soulmates aren't born within the same family. Is that right?
No, but there has been times historically where they were. So, for example, when Mon and a man did have soulmates as children, their bodies were perfect or very close to perfection, so it had no genetic deformity. Obviously, as time goes on and there's deformity that occurs through sin in the genetic structure, obviously having children near the same, in the same family becomes more problematic because of the deformity created by sin. So the more sinful a society becomes, the more problematic it is that, you know, relatives are become parents. But that's not problematic for the soul. It's only problematic for the body, the two bodies.
And so God's laws would have considered that.
Yep.
In more sin.
Yes, the more sin, the wider, generally what happens is the perfection, you can have any child. As the sin develops over time, the more sin you have, the more separation there is of what child will come to you. Okay. Again, governed by law. Yeah. The sin preventing the attractions. Yeah.
What about in the case where a mother miscarried or aborts a child, and then the soulmate that may have come through later, could it come in the same family? Because
certainly.
Yeah.
Yep. Certainly could.
Okay, thank you.
There's no law. Once the soul has transitioned to the spirit body life, there's no law preventing a person incarnating into the other half of the soul incarnating into the same family. Rare, I would suggest. Yeah. I haven't observed it, but it's possible. Yeah.